Welcome in. What is up, SODFS fam? We are back. It's Friday night here, back in the lab. We got a real exciting slate here this week. Nate and I were just kind of talking pre-show, and this one's looking like it's going to be a real banger. So, as per usual, make sure you are subscribed to us here on YouTube, following Sons of Dynasty there on Twitter at Dynasty Sons. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Brown NFL, and here with me, as usual, is my guy Nate, and you can find him on Twitter at Nate_L. Nate, what's going on, my brother?
Not much, man. Had some technical issues before the show, which tends to happen when you miss a week. So I do want to say that I appreciate you guys holding it down last week. Had some internet issues. Now I had some headphone issues. But I'm excited to be here. Brother Matt's hooked up some sweet layovers. I'm excited to show everybody those. Excited to talk football. This is an exciting slate, which sometimes in the middle of the season you tend to get to a little bit of a lag and, a little bit of repetition. But this slate is definitely exciting and definitely has the opportunity to make some money.
Yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of good games, a lot of games that we want to get a piece of in this one. It's not just that one, maybe two games in this slate that we feel like a lot of the ownership is going to get condensed around. Now, there's some games that we think are going to be a little bit more popular than others, obviously, but there is a wide variety, a lot of revenge game narratives this week, so it's shaping up as a good one.
Yeah, there is a lot of revenge games. That's something I was talking about with my buddy a little bit earlier when I was still at work, but we can keep the show moving considering we got a late start. I just wanted to mention that Sons of Dynasty are officially partnered with the Fantasy Points Media Group. Please make sure you check those guys out. They have a lot of great content over there at Fantasy Points Premium and the Premium Access. Use promo code SUNS22 for 10% off of your subscription today.
All right, let's talk about some of these games that we're looking at for the main slate. We'll start with some of the early games. We've got Broncos at Ravens, the over-under sitting at 39.5. That's a game that's going to go a little under the radar. Obviously, the Broncos suck, and nobody wants any piece of them. And the Ravens haven't looked that good either the last couple of weeks. So Lamar Jackson actually coming in at sub 5% ownership as of right now. Just something to pay attention to. There is the Browns at the Texans. Browns are 7-point favorites with the over-under sitting at 47.5. We like some pieces in that game. Commanders at Giants. No interest for me for the most part. Jaguars at Lions, over-under 51 in the Dome. I think this is a game that is probably my favorite game to try to attack as far as the early games go. Nate, your Lions once again involved in a game that we're attacking, but this is probably my favorite game of the early game slate.
It's my favorite game by far. There't a lot of pieces here that I definitely like on the Jaguars side, which hasn't happened a whole lot this year, but I'm definitely excited for this one and the next one you're going to mention a lot.
Yeah, I think this one's kind of got some sneaky upside. Might actually go under the radar a little bit. That's the Jets and the Vikings. They're in Minnesota, over under currently sitting at 44.5. There's some pieces that we're going to talk about tonight on both sides of the ball, really. But I think that could be a good shootout game and one that I don't mind taking the over on.
Yeah, there's a lot of great pieces in that game. That it's a tie for me between Jags, Lions, and Jets, Vikings.
Rounding out the early 1:00 games, Packers at Bears, over-under at 44. Steelers at Falcons, over-under 42.5. Titans at Eagles, over-under currently sitting at 44. So those are the early games. And then heading into the afternoon, you really got some quality teams as well and some quality game environments, starting with the Dolphins at the 49ers, over-under at 46.5. We may have to try to get back to Tua builds this week. And the 49ers with some injury news that we'll discuss could be interesting. Maybe a way to fit some Niners. I like Kittle this week. Go ahead and throw that out there. Seahawks at Rams, over under at 40.5. Not a whole lot of interest in this game right here. It's kind of the one that I'm least interested in as far as the afternoon games go. But then there's Chargers at Raiders, over under at a 50 burger right now. We like some pieces in that game. And then the game of the week, if you will, that's the Chiefs at the Bengals, over under at 52.5. Expecting a fucking shootout in that one, and we're going to be all over the pieces involved.
Yeah, there is a little interest for me in this Rams-Seahawks game, and the fact that the Rams are going to lose out the rest of their games with their preseason squad on the field, and the Lions are going to get a premium draft pick out of it. So go Rams.
All right, Nate, let's talk about some of the injuries and news heading into this slate that is relevant here.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. We're going to start with the Bears and quarterback Justin Fields, who is a full participant in practice today for a second straight day and actually has no injury designation going into Sunday's game versus the Packers, which does surprise me a little bit. The Bears believe that Fields is going to be good to go. Rams quarterback John Wolford, as I mentioned, will start Sunday versus Seattle. Matthew Stafford is suffering from both concussion symptoms and neck issues following the team's loss to the Saints. Jaguars coach Doug Peterson tells reporters that running back Travis Etienne is good to go for Sunday, while running back Michael Carter with his ankle injury is doubtful. Another running back, Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders, is questionable. After returning to practice in a limited fashion on Thursday, Christian McCaffrey told reporters that he feels great and that he dodged a bullet with his knee issue. The only thing that remains up in the air really for us in fantasy is going to be how limited McCaffrey will be in the game Sunday. Buccaneers running back Leonard Fournette opened Week 13 as a full participant in practice. Assuming Fournette does suit up, it is uncertain what role he will have or what role Rachaad White will have, how the running backs will balance that out in the next few weeks. Running back Joe Mixon is questionable to play Sunday for the Cincinnati Bengals. Another running back, Josh Jacobs, has a calf injury. He is listed as questionable for Sunday's game against the Chargers after practicing in limited fashion this week. Najee Harris, yet another running back, was listed as did not practice this week, limited practice, has no injury tag now. Bengals star wide receiver Jamar Chase will play Sunday. I'm very excited for this against the Chiefs. He missed 4 games with a hip injury, and there was a great breakdown on Twitter, man. I forget who did that tweet, but it's on my timeline. Shout out to him. And this is not fantasy related, but it's still going to have a big impact. The Bills have placed linebacker Von Miller on injury reserve, which sucks for the Bills defense. He came into Buffalo and was a big part of that defense.
Just want to add too that Deebo Samuel has been having some practice issues. I think that quad is still bothering him. I think as of right now, it is unlikely that he's going to play this week, which would bump up Kittle and Ayuk a little bit in the rankings this week. So something to monitor. Obviously we've been worried about is CMC going to play? Well, lo and behold, we may not have Deebo Samuel in this matchup.
Yeah, that could have a big impact too on McCaffrey's production, depending on how good he is to go.
All right, Nate. Well, you ready to talk about some of the quarterbacks that we love on this main slate this week?
Yeah, I'm ready, man. There's a lot of good ones. We're going to start with Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders this week. He is priced at $7,200 on DraftKings and has a projected ownership of just 6% currently. The Chargers offense has obviously been torn up all year by injuries, and because of that, Herbert's numbers have not necessarily been, I guess, what we would expect out of him. He's thrown for fewer than 2 touchdowns in 5 games while going under 250 in 4. Over the last 2 contests, though, he's put up 280 and 274 yards while throwing 2 and 3 touchdowns, respectively. And the good news about this is Keenan Allen appears to be healthy, and he's kind of getting up to speed with this offense. He's getting reacquainted, and you can see it in the numbers. Over the last 2 games, he scored 28.76 and 20.7 DraftKings fantasy points. Prior to that, Herbert put up fewer than 20 DraftKings fantasy points in 5 of 7 games. So this is an opportunity for us as DFS players to gravitate towards this Chargers offense that's gelling back together, getting some guys back here and there. And I'm going to be playing Herbert in this matchup at 7,200 against a Raiders defense that likes to give up passing yards.
Yeah, I think Herbert's in a great spot this week. Obviously, you could take Eckler along. You could take Keenan Allen along with him as well. I mean, Austin Eckler, I think 15 targets over the past 2 weeks. So he's just been soaking it up. And that was with Keenan Allen back this past week too. So really do like Eckler. You got to pay up for him this week. And there are some cheaper options and some value at the running back position that makes it tough to do. But let's talk about another QB that I like. Mentioned him already. That is smoking Joe Burrow there for the Cincinnati Bengals. And he's just too cheap this week, coming in at $6,900. I think he had $200 more than he was this past week, which felt too cheap. And now he gets Jamar Chase back. And now he's in this game environment, which we just think he's going to have to just drop back and chuck that rock. So love Joe Burrow at this price tag. Right now coming in at 8%. I think we might see that number rise a little bit. But Kansas City is the second softest schedule-adjusted matchup for opposing QBs through the air this season, allowing 3.1 passing fantasy yards per game over the field. 2022 Chiefs defense has allowed a 22-6 touchdown to interception ratio and a 99.2 QB passer rating thus far into the season. So as I mentioned, the Bengals are coming in as 2-point underdogs as of right now, and we are expecting this game to be a shootout. Joe Mixon, I believe, is going to get back, but he still hasn't cleared the final stage of concussion protocol, to my knowledge. So there's a chance maybe he doesn't go. I think Joe Burrow, either way, is a really good spot this week.
Yeah, it's a great spot with a high over under. And like you said, Jamar Chase is back, and that is going to have an effect on his numbers and in the passing game for the Bengals. So I really, really like that call. I do think the number goes up a little bit, but he's still playable even at even if it's up from 8%. I'm going to talk about Trevor Lawrence, quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, you said it earlier, he is playing my Detroit Lions. And that is a team that, as much as I love, I've been attacking relentlessly on this show the whole season. Lawrence's price is $5,900 on DraftKings, and his projected ownership at this point is 14%. That number probably will go up because there's a lot of people high on him, including a lot of analysts that are putting his name out there. So the Lions have allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, regardless of the format or the platform. And what's even better is that Lawrence has put up one of the best fantasy lines of his career last week against Baltimore, throwing for 321 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions en route to a personal best 129.8 QB rating. So I don't have a lot of data here. He's playing the Lions. They're going to give up a ton of points, and Lawrence is probably going to be connected to those points for the Jaguars.
Yeah, no, I like him. He's a great price tag. We've really seen him kind of ascend these last couple weeks here, getting that passing game going. And yes, I think ETN's expected back, but I still like Trevor Lawrence a lot in this matchup. Again, that's a game that we like a lot, just being able to have a T-Law stack. And Amon-Ra St. Brown potentially on the bring back, Swift, potentially stepping into a larger role this week, losing his injury designation for the first time since week 1. He's down there at like 5,600 or something. That's enticing for me this week. So I may have some Swift exposure. Going to be GPP oriented for sure, but I do like that game and finding ways to stack that game up. Another one all the way down, cheap bottom QB of the barrel would be Mike White there for the New York Jets. Big Mike White stepping into a starter role, and he's performing, coming off a 78% completion rate in week 12, and he's only coming in at 3% projected ownership. So we're talking about Millie Maker Mike this week, and he's getting a great matchup. Obviously, Minnesota really stout against the run, but their pass defense has allowed the 3rd most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game, the 10th highest completion percentage over expectation, and the 6th most fantasy points per drop back to opposing quarterbacks since week 7. So Minnesota has just been abused through the air, whether it's going to be Bam Knight or whomever at running back this week. I don't care. I think that Mike White is going to find success through the air, and we'll talk about a couple of his receiving options a little bit later on. But 5,400, 3%, you're talking large field GPP. Give Mike White some consideration.
Yeah, I liked Mike White before you added that projected ownership to the show sheet. And now that that's there, I just like it even more, man. And it does help also that we like a couple other pieces of this Jets teams. But $5,400 for Mike White, I think, is an excellent play against a very suspect Minnesota Vikings defense.
Yeah, I love those guys. And as we mentioned, there's other QBs that are definitely in play. I mean, Pat Mahomes, yes, you got to pay up for him at 8,300, but I like him this week. Jalen Hurts, we talked about at 8K. I think that Philly-Tennessee game could be pretty sneaky. Doesn't seem like a ton of people are wanting any part of it, but, we like Treylon Burks a little bit this week. So I do
actually like Hurts quite a bit, even at 8,000 on DraftKings. He's going to be a good play. The Eagles probably will have a little more trouble running, which is going to make Hurts throw more. And there's a reason I have a receiver of his in our show later on. But if you want to throw up in your mouth, you could also play Jared Goff at 5,300, the Lions quarterback. He's going to be very low owned, and it's, you're not going to get a ton of points out of him. But I think he does have a solid day, somewhere around 20 points, and at his price tag, that hits value.
Yeah, maybe a Jimmy G stack with
Yeah, yeah.
Tyreek bring back or Waddle on the bring back. There's, like I mentioned, there's just a lot of options on this slate. It's going to make for a really fun slate, I think, both for GPP and cash building purposes. So I'm pretty stoked up about this one. But let's talk about some of the running backs as we keep moving on into the show, and starting with a guy who's just been, flaming hot these last few weeks, and really slick, kind of broke the slate with that big long overtime run last week.
Yeah, it's hard not to mention him, man. Even with a 23% projected ownership, and we've mentioned him a lot this year, which is something I didn't really think would happen when the year began. But it's Josh Jacobs, the running back of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's obviously the focal point of this Raiders offense, and I do believe that the addition of Devontae Adams has opened up the middle of the field for Jacobs and allowed players to not cram the box, and for Jacobs to have more room to run. He's coming off a 33 carry game in which he totaled 229 yards and 2 touchdowns, including that gallop off run of 86 yards in overtime. He's put up 51.3, 22, and 22.6 DraftKings fantasy points, respectively, over the last 3 games. And prior to that, he went for 30 DraftKings fantasy points in weeks 4 through 6. He's receiving at least 20 carries in 6 contests. And on the season, he has 48 targets and 29 red zone opportunities, which is crucial, to DraftKings success. So even at 7,900, even at 23% projected ownership, I do like Jacobs quite a bit, and especially for cash. If you're playing cash, you can lock Jacobs in if you can get him in your lineup at that price tag.
I love Jacobs this week because of what he's been doing, and because of that price tag at 7,900. It makes this next guy that I'm going to talk about so much lower in the projected ownership this week, coming in at 8%. I'm talking about Nick Chubb there for the Cleveland Browns with the gravy train matchup against those Houston Texans. He's coming in at 8K, so he's $100 more than Josh Jacobs. It's been on a fucking tear these last few weeks. Not many people are going to want to pay $100 more to get to Nick Chubb. Yeah, they're playing the Houston Texans, but Josh Jacobs is putting up 30 burgers almost on a weekly basis. I like Nick Chubb this week. He's going to be in a lot of my builds. Through the first 8 weeks of the season, Chubb handled about 52% of the running backfield share, and Kareem Hunt was sitting at about 44%. But after the week 9 bye, Chubb has been sitting at 69% and Hunt at a lower 29%. So Chubb has really kind of taken over this backfield more so than what we saw in the beginning of the season. And this week he gets to that matchup that I talked about. Houston Texans defense, they rank 4th worst in yards per carry and worst in rushing fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position. Yes, Deshaun Watson, the scumbag that he is back this week, and maybe that opens up the offense a little bit, but I don't think they're going to want to put him into a position to just drop back and pass. They have a great matchup here. I think they just want to get him some reps. The guy hasn't played football in over 2 years now. They're not going to ask him to do much. I think they're going to lean on Nick Chubb this week and just get the win, get the snaps for Watson and the Browns as they continue to try to gel heading into the regular season here. I love Nick Chubb 8K.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Watson affects the rest of these players on this offense, because as much as we don't like the douchebag, he is a dynamic football player. So it could change how things affect Chubb and some of those other pieces on the Cleveland Browns offense. So I'm very interested in it. I do love the call, though. Their ownership is excellent, and Chubb is a solid running back, solid scores every week. So a great call by you. I'm going to talk about Dameon Pierce, running back of the Houston Texans. He's 5,900 on DraftKings and has a projected ownership much higher than I thought it would be at 18%. I thought that a lot more people would be off this guy, considering he's rushed for 8 yards in 2 consecutive games and has scored less than 5 DraftKings points in 2 consecutive games. But I do think that a lot of that is the product of how bad the Texans offense is. I think that it's hurt him quite a bit. It's hurt a lot of the other pieces in that offense. But I do think that there's some things in this game that could lead to Pierce having a bit of a bounce back week. For one, Rex Burkhead has entered concussion protocol. And for 2, the Browns have given up the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs and the 3rd most rushing scores on the year at 16. So it's a good spot for Pierce to have a bounce back. They are touchdown underdogs in this game, so the game script might not be too much in his favor, but I think he's a solid play at 5,900.
Yeah, at Elite Picks, Dameon Pierce is coming in at a 91.5 score this week. And it's just that matchup. The Browns have been beat up on the ground. And so, maybe Pierce steps up this week and kind of has a bounce back performance with this matchup. Another cheap running back that I'll talk about is my guy Gus Bus Edwards. He's coming in at 5,400 and projected ownership of 2%. But he's back and he immediately stepped into a lead back role this past week and handled 84% of the carries. That's 16 of 19 running back carries this past week. And the Ravens are favored by 7 points in this matchup. The best way to attack the Broncos has been via the run and the ground game. Just this last week, we saw Carolina Panthers Foreman and Hubbard rush for over 180 yards against this defense. Until J.K. Dobbins is back in the fold, I think I'm going to continue to ride Gus Bus. And this week against Denver, low ownership, low price tag, I'm going to have some exposure.
Yeah, it's a good call. Somebody I didn't consider too much, honestly, before, I seen him on the show sheet and puts a little bit of extra thought into it. But 2% projected ownership is something it's always going to catch my eye, and I love the price tag. Speaking of cheap price tags, I want to give an honorable mention to Zonovan Knight, the running back of the New York Jets. He's only $4,600, so you don't need much out of him to get to value, and he's got 3% projected ownership. He obviously scored 13.3 DraftKings fantasy points last week. After coming off the practice squad and onto the active roster in his NFL debut, 14 rushing attempts for 69 yards, 3 receptions for 34 yards on 3 targets. After Michael Carter sprained his ankle, leaving White and Ty Johnson to kind of pick up a lot of the workload. But I think Zonovan Knight he's obviously a risky play, but I do think that he's going to get some share of this Jets offense going forward. I think he's proving himself, and my gut's really telling me to get in early in some GPPs, before his price tag climbs and everybody else is on him too. I think this is a great play for the Millie Maker.
Yeah, and he's getting almost no ownership right now, even after kind of what we saw. I think people are skeptical on the situation in general. Is J-Rob going to come back into the fold? And, after being a healthy scratch this past week. So a little bit of uncertainty around that situation again. I think the passing game for the Jets is really what I do want to attack on this slate, but definitely a way to get a little bit more contrarian.
Yeah, he's not going to get you, 20 DraftKings points. Unlikely. He could maybe, but again, at 4,600, you don't need a ton.
Josh Jacobs is the only running back on this main slate that has a perfect 100 score there at Elite Picks this week. Elite Picks is the newest daily fantasy lineup optimizer. You can take as much control as you'd like by locking in and customizing and letting the DFS lineup optimizer fill in the rest. Elite Picks optimizer uses top projections and provides cutting-edge multi-lineup features to direct you to your lineup guidance that you need to build a winning lineup on DraftKings and or FanDuel on a weekly basis. Never tried one before? That is no problem. You can try one absolutely free. Check the link in the description down below, and there is a link for 1 week of free access to that optimizer. Highly recommend you guys check that out. It has been one of the better edges I have found in this industry the last couple weeks, and definitely worth a look.
Yeah, big shout out to Elite Picks. I've been really digging into their stuff, man. They have great things, and you get a week for free, so no risk to you.
All right, Nate, let's move on into the wide receiver discussion this week. There's a lot of guys that we like this week, and we're going to just mention a few of them here. Again, it's really about finding the game environment that you're trying to stack around. Maybe you're just getting a one-off piece from each side, and that's it, a little mini stack to go with your grand stack there at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mentioned that I like Jalen Hurts for reasons, he's facing the Tennessee Titans and their great rush defense, so I think he will be throwing the ball. I think, obviously, A.J. Brown is a great play, but I'm going to jump down $1,600 cheaper than AGB and go with Devontae Smith, wide receiver, obviously, for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's at $6,200 on DraftKings and has a projected ownership of just 9%. I'll admit, I've been feeling a bit down the last few weeks. It's not that Smith has played bad or hasn't had, decent numbers. He's had average numbers, but he was one of my favorite prospects of the 2021 NFL draft. And I kind of thought maybe bigger things, would develop at this point in the year. However, I do think it's time probably for me to push my chips in this matchup. Smith has been significantly seen increased opportunity and a higher target share than A.J. Brown since Dallas Goedert went down. In week 13, again, he's facing the Titans that rank first against the run, 16th versus the pass in DVOA, and also allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. So AJB is a great play, or you can drop down $1,600 cheaper, play Devontae Smith, and he could have a repeat game of earlier in the year when he went off for 33 DraftKings points.
Yeah, I like that call. I mentioned I think that game is going a little bit under the radar as of right now, and I want to get some AJB exposure this week with that revenge game narrative. So I think attacking that Philadelphia Eagles offense could be advantageous this week for sure. I mentioned the Bengals, mentioned Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Well, T. Higgins, a guy that I was in on last week and treated me well. He is back in the fold this week, coming in at 14% projected ownership. The three best games of T. Higgins' career have come in games where Cincinnati's implied team total is 24 points or higher, and it is 25.25 this week in this matchup. So expecting T. Higgins to once again come through. Jamar Chase, obviously back in the fold. I don't think that hurts T. It's as much as it hurts him, it helps him. Yes, we know Jamar Chase can come in and dominate touches. I don't think that's going to be the case in his first game back after the lengthy absence. I think they want to get him. They need to get him involved in this game, but I think T. Higgins is going to continue to be the bread and butter in this matchup, and got a great matchup against this Chiefs defense. So the Chiefs are currently sitting as the 9th softest schedule-adjusted matchup for opposing wide receivers, fantasy points per game. The over-under in this one is one we're chasing. Both sides of the ball, really, I think is going to be a good target offense. And again, probably the most popular game as well. But Joe Burrow, T. Higgins is a fine way to start a lineup, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase being back doesn't necessarily hurt T. Higgins, because the offense is going to have to pay attention to Chase being on the field. It's going to take him time maybe to get up to speed. He is a freak athlete, so it might not. He might be back, just tearing it up right away. But just because Jamar Chase is back doesn't mean T. Higgins' points just fall off the board. So I like that call. I'm going to talk about a guy that I've waited all year to talk about. I might not get to talk about him the rest of the year. So I'm taking the opportunity right now to get him on an SODFS this season. It's Elijah Moore, a guy we both really liked last year and still do like. He's 3,700 on DraftKings, almost the bare minimum price, and his ownership is a whopping 1% projected. So there's not a lot here. There's not. He didn't have a breakout game last week, but he did have a role in the game. He did have an opportunity to play, and he did have an opportunity to show his talent. He had 2 catches, 64 yards, and that touchdown. And hopefully the coaches are watching that and you saying, hey, this guy's got some talent. Maybe we get him the ball a little bit. His snap share wasn't great, 42%. But it is notable that Moore ran ahead of Denzel Mims this week in practice. Mims's route share, he ran routes and 90% of dropbacks in week 11. That number's plummeted to 23% last week in week 12. I think Elijah Moore, I pray to God Elijah Moore starts to get more opportunities and, gets to get on the field and play football because it turns out he's actually pretty good at it.
Yeah, I think he is the unpopular play this week, and the popular play is going to be Garrett Wilson there at 5,300. He's coming in at 17% projected ownership. So really, price tag, just considering what we saw on him this past week, doesn't really make a ton of sense there at 5,300. Feels too cheap. I think the field is going to be in on him as well. In his 4 games without Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson averages 9.3 targets, 8.8 first read targets, and 17.8 expected fantasy points. If that was over a full season, those numbers would rank 12th, 3rd, 8th, and 8th best. So Wilson faces this Minnesota Vikings defense that we already mentioned ranks worst in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to outside wide receivers. That's both over the last 5 weeks and over the full season itself. So great matchup here for these Jets wide receivers. Again, that running back matchup is going to be stout. It's going to be tough. and we got potentially a couple of backups there that are going to be toting the rock anyway. Well, what are they going to end up having to do? It's going to be Mike White dropping back and throwing bombs to Wilson, and hopefully Elijah Moore at that sub 2% ownership he's projected for on a price tag at 3.7K.
Yeah, let Elijah Moore be the unpopular play, because I'm going to be the guy that has Mike White, Garrett Wilson, and Elijah Moore in that double stack for under $15,000 of roster money. So you can let him be unpopular.
That's cheap enough to let you get Justin Jefferson for the bring back there. And yeah, he's got a pretty tough matchup. But I'm not worried about that. He's not worried about it. That's for sure.
No, yeah, I love it. Another guy I want to mention, just had to give him a shout out a little bit, is Treylon Burks, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. He is facing the Eagles defense. He's priced at 4,600, but since Burks has been back, man, he has been great. He's had 8 targets in week 11, 6 targets in week 12. Had 111 yards, 70 yards, 7 receptions, 4 receptions. He scored 21.1 DraftKings fantasy points week 11, 17 DraftKings fantasy points in week 12. He's pretty much the only considerable weapon that this Titans offense has, and he's still under $5,000. So how do you not at least consider playing him?
Yeah, no, I like that call. He has been showing that explosiveness these last couple of weeks.
He looks good.
And as you mentioned, there's really just nobody else there to throw the ball. And you look up and you see this Philadelphia offense that's likely to be ahead, and they're likely to not necessarily just be able to sit back and lean on Derrick Henry when you have an offense as prolific as this Philadelphia Eagles offense that can put up 24 points in a quarter if they want to. I think we could see Treylon Burks with double-digit targets potentially this week. And at 4,600, that's a fucking steal.
Yep, absolutely, man. So you get guys like, Mike White, even Garrett Wilson, who's not priced extremely high. You get Elijah Moore, you get Treylon Burks in your lineup. Then you can afford guys like Travis Kelce, tight end of the Kansas City Chiefs. He is expensive. He's almost 8,000. He's 7,900 and has 11% projected ownership. But Travis Kelce is the best wide receiver on this Kansas City offense. He has 102 targets on the season. Only 6 other players have more. For perspective, Devontae Adams leads the league with 123 targets. Tyreek Hill has 115. Travis Kelce is right behind these guys. He's received at least 7 targets in every game this season, going for more than 10 4 times with a high of 17. He's scored in 3 consecutive games and has 3 and 4 touchdowns. The ceiling floor combo is unmatched at the position. Tight end is getting harder. It's getting grosser, even though we like to save money here. 11% is a pretty good ownership, and the game, again, that we mentioned, the Bengals and the Chiefs, is going to be a fun game to watch, and there will be points scored. I do have a feeling Travis Kelce will be the recipient of one of those Patrick Mahomes touchdown throws.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Get Pat Mahomes in there. Travis Kelce, if you don't want to get cute, just lock those 2 guys in as far as the Kansas City side of the ball is. And then you do have some options with potentially, Higgins there on a bring back, or if Joe Mixon ends up suiting up, potentially getting him in there. So I really like that call with Travis Kelce this week. He's the same price point, pretty much 7,900. As far as a wide receiver goes, that is a Jamar Chase price tag, or that is AJ Brown this week at 7,800. So, just from a comparable standpoint, yeah, it sucks to pay up at tight end, and you're talking about 7,900 when typically we're, right around 3.5K for a lot of the guys we're targeting. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you are swallowing it, Travis Kelce in this game environment, I think makes a ton of sense. One other kind of pay up option at tight end this week, I mentioned towards the beginning of the show, would be George Kittle there in San Fran against the Miami Dolphins, who have been absolutely dog shit against the tight ends the last 6 weeks. He's 5K this week, George Kittle is. But if this Miami offense can come out and start firing, no Deebo Samuel, potentially a banged up CMC that's not 100%, we could see a really nice Kittle game here this week. And at 5K, I think is a way to get a little bit different. And by not paying up for Kelce, yet not also getting in the sub 4K range where you're going to see a lot of the field gravitate towards.
Yeah, I don't mind the Kittle call at all. Tight end's hard, man. It's hard to find leverage. It's hard to find production. And it's hard to find consistency. So Kittle's a guy that's definitely, that San Francisco offense has a lot of weapons, and I think that's benefited Kittle quite a bit so that teams aren't, double guarding him and putting 2 guys on.
As far as the cheaper options go, I'm interested in Hayden Hurst this week, 3,500. Again, staying in that game that I'm attacking. I've mentioned it before. If I'm interested in a QB, there's a good chance that I'm interested in their tight end that week. It's just a great way to get, all your pieces together. It's a cheap correlation piece more often than not, a sub 4K piece that if your quarterback goes off and it does well, Hayden Hurst coming in at 8% this week, Joe Burrow 8%. So those two guys 16%, T Higgins probably hovering just sub 20, 18% somewhere in there. So that's not a bad little stack right there with Burrow, Higgins, and Hurst. And you don't have to push any eggs into the Jamar Chase basket. This week, maybe wait and see if he's limited in any fashion. But I like Hayden Hurst this week. We're chasing points in this game, and with a 52.5 point over under, Hayden Hurst could definitely get there. He set season high in targets and yards this past week, so getting a little bit more involved. Yes, Chase back in the fold, but Kansas City could be had versus the tight end position.
Yeah, man. And the numbers are great, the matchup's great, but look at my man's arms on the overlay, dude. He looks like John Cena. There's no way I'm going to say anything bad about Hayden Hurst. I did not know he was that strong.
Fucking jacked,
dude. I know it's fun. I couldn't. That's all I was staring at when you were talking. So I'm sorry about that. But I do want to. You mentioned earlier, teams that are dog shit against tight ends. I'm going to mention Logan Thomas for the simple fact that he is playing the New York Giants this week. Thomas is priced at 2,900 and has a projected ownership, not surprisingly, of 2%. So again, this play is about the opponent's inability to defend the position, much more than Thomas's ability as a football player. At this point in his career, all due respect. The Giants are dead last in DVOA against the position and allow 10th most receptions, 7th most yards, and 4 touchdowns on the season. Thomas is out snapping his teammate John Bates, who has been on the field, but the snap rate's about 55 to 70% when you compare them. Thomas has received only 3 targets last week, while John Bates got 4. And more importantly, 2 red zone looks for Thomas is the number that I'm looking at. They're using Thomas in the end zone, and we want Thomas to get points. So he's cheap. He's a low risk gamble at 2,900. He doesn't need a lot. I do think there's a great opportunity here for him to get a touchdown against the Giants defense that just can't do anything against, opposing tight ends. So it's risky, absolutely, but it's a great GPP play in my opinion, and it gives you yet another opportunity to save some money. If he scores a touchdown, he's already doubled his value.
I've got a couple of other tight end punts here that I'll throw out. They are in the sub 3K range, and starting with Harrison Bryant there for the Browns. David Njoku has been ruled out, so Bryant is going to step in to that role there. Yes, it hasn't proved to be too good of a role when he had that opportunity a couple of weeks ago, but he could have a bounce back game here with now Deshaun Watson there under center. And one more I'll mention would be Noah Gray there. He is also coming in at 2,700. That's the backup tight end for the Kansas City. And yes, if you don't want to pay up for Kelsey, but yet you want to get a piece of this game, one that's going to be vastly under-owned in Noah Gray at 2,700. And you're like, is he getting any work? He actually has been. I mean, he's averaging 2.5 to 3 targets a game for the past 6 weeks at this point. And get some work there in the red zone. Again, not a guy that I'm looking to jam into any of my cash builds, but if you're talking about a GPP and ways to get into these games that we think are going to be super popular, well, finding a piece like that, and not only does it allow you to pay up and get some of these high-priced wide receivers that we're after, but it also allows you to get a little bit of correlation for that game stack for the Kansas City and the Bengals.
Yeah, I like Foster Moreau too. I like to give Foster Moreau some love at 3,600 of the Las Vegas Raiders. If you're playing a couple of those Chargers guys like Herbert, Keenan Allen, or possibly Austin Eckler, Foster Moreau is very, very fairly priced. Darren Waller is expected to be out at least this week, maybe longer. So as long as Waller's out, Foster Moreau is going to get opportunities. He had 12.3 DraftKings points last week and a touchdown. So very likely that he could get you another touchdown this week, and it is price tag, not hard to hit value.
All right, let's talk about some DSTs. The DSTs are fucking terrible. I don't like any of them, and the ones that I do, I feel like are priced up too much.
Yeah,
What about you?
DST is always hard. One that I've kind of had my eye on is the Green Bay Packers, just for the simple fact that Justin Fields is banged up, even though he doesn't have an injury designation right now. He's definitely feeling the wear and tear of the NFL season. No Darnell Mooney, no Khalil Herbert. And the Green Bay defense, has actually gotten a little bit better over the last few weeks. So I think there's potential there for some decent points. They're priced at 3,000. Some other ones, man, it is tough this week, dude. Maybe the Jets. I could see, Cousins. This could be a high scoring game, but I do think the Jets defense is pretty good, and they have some talented defensive backs. If you can get a couple interceptions, man, that equals good points for your defense, even if the opposing team does score points.
Yeah, it's just hard to find one that I'm really into at all this week. So it's gonna be just I'm probably just gonna end up going with the cheapest option that has zero ownership across the field this week.
Yeah,
Maybe even somebody like the Rams or somebody at 2,300 against Seattle. Again, Seattle's been okay and the Rams have been terrible, but
I would
they're
like
just
Seattle,
they're
but
cheap enough.
the price of 3,600 for the Seahawks kind of sucks. But against that, the Rams offense is just obliterated with injuries.
It's just the last thing I want to do is put any of my salary towards a DST
No,
so it's like at the end of the day, if I'm picking one of the bottom three teams, I don't really care.
I've often done that. I've often
there's no pressure. There's no pressure on me at that point. If my DST shits the bed, well, what do you want me to do? I had to pick a team. I couldn't leave it fucking blank. So what did I do? I spent the least amount of money. I got the bare minimum. It's an Inogen package we're talking about here at the DST.
I have no fear of scrolling to the bottom of the DST list and picking the cheapest one.
It's just sometimes it's the easiest thing. It's not too often that I just don't. There's none that I'm really feeling sub 3K, but this week is tough. So I'm like I said, I'm going for a cheap one. I'm going for one that nobody else is on because anyway I can get a little bit different. Fuck the chalk.
Yeah, I'll have all the shitty defenses and trade it for all the great plays that we have throughout the rest of the slate at the skill position. So I'm completely fine with it.
Well, I do want to mention that everybody should go check out fantasypoints.com. With Fantasy Points, you have access to the newest and best website in the industry for your season-long daily fantasy and NFL betting needs, access to articles, live streams, podcasts, cheat sheets, and much, much more, all available there at your fingertips. It is the only subscription you will need all football season long. Sign up for the Fantasy Points premium content using our promo code SUNS22. You can get 10% off there at fantasypoints.com. Check it out now because if you ride with Fantasy Points, you will score more in 2022 and beyond.
Yep. I also want to give a shout out to Canva. Canva has partnered up with us and has given us an affiliate link, which is a pretty special opportunity for those of you that also watch the show. If you were doing your own podcast or any kind of video editing at all, Brother Matt has offered up his services very kindly. If you use our link, Brother Matt will give you a free consultation. He'll run you through how he makes these great overlays. His overlays literally do get better every week. And I'm not just saying this because he is our brother and a part of the show. He keeps getting better and better at what he does. So if anything, you need this advice from Brother Matt as much as you need Canva in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Canva's been great. We love it. Matt loves it. Matt does a fucking bang up job. Yeah. So can't say enough good things about having Canva and what it does for us on a weekly basis.
I love tinkering with Canva too, man. Sometimes it's just fun to use. It's easy to use. And it makes a great product in the end. Sorry, I'm just watching what you're doing. Please make sure that you are subbed to the Sons of Dynasty on YouTube. We are at 196 subs right now. We are 4 away from 200. If you guys could help us get over 200 before the end of the regular season, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. If you're not subbed already, please click the sub, click the bell, show us just a little bit of love. It's absolutely free for you to do and means the world to us. So we would greatly appreciate it. If you guys showed your support and sub to the channel, you won't be disappointed. Even during the off season, we have all kinds of great content coming out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Appreciate anybody that's been supporting us this season or last season, but it's been fun. We've reached some really highs this season and of course some lows as well. But this week is looking like a really fun week. So I'm excited to do. I'm probably going to make a bunch of builds this week. Again, this just feels like one of the better weeks that we've had this year, and I'm looking to take advantage.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited about this week. I want to obviously say thank you to Brother Matt. He is behind the camera. He, again, did make all these fantastic overlays. They are extremely, extremely sexy, as is Brother Matt. So thank you to you for all the hard work you do during the week. I know that you're very busy, especially this time of year. The family life got busy. It's football season. It gets tough, but Brother Matt has just stuck with it, and he keeps getting better, even though he's getting busier. So thank you, Brother Matt, for everything you do for us, for being our friend, and for being a part of the show.
If you guys are looking for any Sons of Dynasty or SODFS gear, look no further than ViridianGlobal.com. They have tons and tons of FF apparel or NFL related items that you can check out there, as well as all of our custom gear that is there. So make sure you guys check out ViridianGlobal.com. Again, big shout out to anybody and everybody that hung in there with us tonight, and Brother Matt as per usual. Nate, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I just want to echo what you said. Thank you to the people that watched. Thank you to the comments that we had. Thank you to those of you that are listening in the future. We appreciate that as well. So future listeners, thank you as well.
Yeah. Much love to everybody out there. He is Nate. I am Dan. Peace out, homies. Oh my God, I gotta take a huge fucking dump.